In 1946, at a top-secret facility in Trinity, New Mexico, Albert Einstein tested a newly created device of his called the Chronosphere. Named in reference to the Greek god of time, Chronos, this device was basically a time machine. Einstein used it to travel back to the past in an attempt to stop the man responsible for the Second World War, the most destructive conflict in history. In succeeding, Einstein hoped he had created a new timeline that would be spared from such a horrific war. Despite his good intentions, Einstein's interference in the space-time continuum led to a war just as, if not more destructive than the original. One that would be fought in the 1950s, between the Allied nations of Europe and the Soviet Union, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin. It quickly became clear to the Allies that they couldn't match the Soviet Union in man and material. Thus, they sought to hire the greatest scientific minds of the time to help them develop new technologies, ones that could turn the course of the war in their favor. One of these minds was Albert Einstein, at least this timeline's version of the man. Einstein's most important contribution was his unified field theory, which explained gravitation and electromagnetism with one set of laws, thereby making the weapon that would become known as the Chronosphere possible. The first major test of this weapon system would be conducted on an Allied cruiser, in an event known as the Philadelphia Experiment.
Incredible! We made it disappear and reappear, but with very little control. We lost some men.
But do you have the control problem solved?
That is the heart of the Chronosphere project.
The Soviets were well aware of the Allies' experiments with this Chronosphere device, and assaulted the main research facility in Liechtenstein. The Soviets threw everything they could at the facility, from bombing raids to frontal ground assaults. An unnamed Allied commander, known as Field Commander A9, held them off, enabling the scientists at the facility to complete another crucial test with the device. The results of this test convinced Allied generals that the Chronosphere was ready for action against the Soviets. However, the device had several unresolved issues, which the Allies, in desperation to stop the Soviet onslaught, would ignore, even at the cost of their own forces. The Chronosphere could move a single object from one location to another, without having to cross the space in between. Chronoshift was the name given to this process. However, the object would only exist in its new location for a brief time before instantly returning to its point of origin. This process could be reliably conducted on a vehicular unit, such as a ship or a tank, enabling such units to outmaneuver or ambush enemy forces. Issues would arise when attempting to chronoshift lifeforms, since their molecular structures were more complex. Attempting to chronoshift a human being would, in all but the rarest of circumstances, instantly kill them. While humans inside vehicles would usually survive the chronoshift, some, such as those placed in the back of an APC, would not, either ending up dead, or perhaps more disturbingly, completely erased from existence. Another unit that couldn't be reliably chronoshifted were demolition trucks. These remote-controlled vehicles were armed with an atomic bomb, whose molecular structure was incompatible with the Chronosphere. Any attempt to chronoshift a demo truck triggered its atomic payload, with the resulting explosion causing casualties and devastation on local infrastructure. Another side effect the Allies later encountered regarding the Chronosphere was that it had a 20% chance of producing a chrono vortex each time it was used. The chrono vortex could be best described as a rip in space-time, one that usually appears within the local region of a chronosphere. This physics-defying anomaly is incredibly dangerous. Any units, or even buildings, near or inside the vortex would be destroyed by its electromagnetic shocks. There was no telling how long a vortex would last once it had formed, and any units or civilians were warned to keep away from the vortex until it had dissipated. Due to the potential of these vortices being created, Allied commanders were advised to only use the Chronosphere in exigent circumstances. Further tests of the Chronosphere revealed even more paradoxical side effects. The Soviets suspected one test site was located in Ukraine, and sent a scouting force there to gather more information. The scouting force confirmed the existence of the test site, but that something had gone terribly wrong, causing the entire region to become unstable. Field Commander S7 was sent to investigate and capture the Chronosphere. The commander quickly discovered just how chaotic things had become, particularly with the unit's weapons. Some examples include Soviet heavy tanks having a Tesla coil attack instead of their standard cannons, grenadiers throwing firebombs instead of frag grenades, Allied artillery tanks armed with the guns of a cruiser, and the Mammoth tank's double-barreled cannons launching balls of flame, along with many other strange anomalies. Despite these issues, Commander S7 was able to reach the island the Chronosphere was located on and capture it. Though given how damaged the device was, it may not have been useful to the Soviets, which undoubtedly displeased Stalin, who desperately wanted the device for himself. During the battle for Moscow, the Allies gave their most valuable commander access to the Chronosphere. General Stavros cautioned the commander, saying the Chronosphere could produce unknown side effects, such as the aforementioned Chrono Vortex. With this weapon system in hand, the unnamed Allied commander defeated the Soviet forces, securing the Allies' final victory against the Soviet Union. There were many other notable events involving the Chronosphere throughout the Second World War. Switching over to the Soviet perspective, Stalin became obsessed with capturing a Chronosphere, as he believed this weapon, combined with the Soviets' own Iron Curtain, would make the Union unstoppable. The first opportunity the Soviets had to capture the device was located in Switzerland. However, the device had been booby-trapped to explode if the Soviets attempted to capture it directly. With that in mind, the commander sent to handle the mission was ordered to capture the 3 Allied tech centers around the Chronosphere first. It was believed that doing so could possibly disable the traps. Unfortunately for the Soviet commander, this tactic didn't work, as the Chronosphere self-destructed right after capturing the tech centers. Though the Chronosphere in Switzerland had been destroyed, the Soviets were able to capture Albert Einstein. Nadia leaked the time of Einstein's execution to the Allies, which enabled them to chronoshift him out of Soviet captivity. Although a risky move given the Chronosphere's potential to kill humans, the risk was worth it given Einstein's reputation. Having placed a tracker on Einstein beforehand, the Soviets were able to locate where the Allies had chronoshifted him. When the unnamed Soviet commander arrived at the Allied base in the Iberian Peninsula, he was informed that he had to destroy or capture 4 radar domes. Doing so would disable the transmitters that would trigger the Chronosphere's self-destruct sequence. The Soviet commander was successful, though it was short-lived, as after the Chronosphere had been captured, it again self-destructed. This was due to another transmitter the field commander had not been informed of by General Kukov, who would later pay the price for such a failure. Other instances where the Soviet Union went up against the Allied Chronosphere included Operation Mousetrap. The Allies' Greek commander Stavros had finally been cornered, taking refuge inside a bunker filled with Chronosphere technology. The general used these Chronospheres to avoid the Soviet troops sent into the bunker to eliminate him. An engineer among this detachment was able to capture a damaged Chronosphere and use it to bring himself to a sectioned-off part of the facility, where the power generators were located. Destroying these generators effectively disabled the other Chronospheres. No longer able to use them to evade his pursuers, Stavros was eventually cornered and eliminated by Soviet troops. In France, Soviet reconnaissance discovered the Allies developing a new Chrono-based weapon at a nearby research facility. Previous attempts to assault the facility were met with failure, so a new approach was needed. Using a force of troops and a supply truck carrying poison, they were able to poison the local region's water supply via waterfalls. The nearby civilian town was the first to succumb to the poison, followed by Allied troops stationed at a forward base. The Soviet troops entered the Allied base unopposed, capturing a Chronosphere that enabled them to chronoshift an MCV onto the island where the research facility was located. After building up his base, Commander S7 sent his forces to eliminate the Allied defenders at the facility, capturing the primary center with engineers. However, the commander was unable to maintain control over the captured Chronosphere, which was destroyed by Allied reinforcements. Elsewhere in France, the Soviets discovered an island which acted as a testing ground for a new Allied weapon called the ChronoTech. From what little the Soviets knew regarding this tank, it was armed with its own downsized chrono device, enabling it to chronoshift itself nearly anywhere on the battlefield. Commander S7 was once again called upon to eliminate this base, and claim the island for the Soviet Union. The commander had to keep his own base well defended, for an attack from the chronotanks could literally come out of nowhere. Despite these chrono assaults, Commander S7 was able to destroy the nearby Allied base, including a chronosphere and any experimental chronotanks the Allies had left. From the Allies' perspective, the ChronoTech was their latest, though highly expensive, technological advancement. The most important aspect of the ChronoTech was that it didn't have some of the negative side effects of the Chronosphere. For example, when the tank engaged its chronoshift ability, there was no concern over it generating a chrono vortex, or any other anomaly. In addition, the tank wouldn't automatically return to its original pre-shift location. The ChronoTech was armed with heat-seeking missile launchers attached to each side of the vehicle. These missiles were especially effective against structures, but could also take on ground vehicles and even aircraft. The ChronoTank did have its fair share of downsides, which included its slow movement speed and light armor, which meant it couldn't go toe-to-toe in a direct fight with a Soviet heavy tank. Activating a chronoshift required much of the tank's internal power. Because of this, the tank would need time to recharge its capacitors before being able to conduct another chronoshift, thus potentially putting it in a vulnerable situation. While the chronotanks weren't present at the final Battle of Moscow, they were utilized in other theaters of the war. In northern Italy, the Soviets took over a small research base, capturing a group of Allied scientists. During the conflict, a chronosphere was badly damaged, and the Allies feared it could explode and wipe out the entire base. A rescue team was sent in to retrieve the scientists. As they made their way along the single path to the base, they encountered heavy Soviet resistance. Chronotanks were deployed to help the team reach the base. These tanks provided additional support after the scientists had been freed, exfiltrating the area while being pursued by a division of Soviet Mammoth tanks. In Poland, the Soviet Union was planning another atomic strike on London. The missile silos were located on a large island, which only had one well-guarded beach access point. Airlifting in units wasn't an option due to SAM sites placed on nearby islands. Thus, the Allies' only option was to use the chronotanks. A couple of chronotanks chronoshifted themselves onto the smaller garrisoned islands, taking out the radar domes that controlled the SAM sites. With these domes dealt with, and the SAM sites out of commission, Special Agent Tanya was brought in to destroy the plants powering the large island's defenses. Without power, the Allies could safely sail in an MCV, establishing a base on the large island. This base enabled Field Commander A9 to build up an attack force to destroy the missile silos. Elsewhere in Poland, the Soviets were testing out their newest weapon, called the Mad Tank. Further development on this destructive system couldn't be allowed to continue, and Field Commander A9 was assigned to handle the mission. After using spies to infiltrate 3 Soviet intel centers, the Allied commander made use of chronotanks, and possibly the Chronosphere, to destroy the revealed control station. With this station gone, the base could no longer produce any more Mad Tanks, making it easier for the field commander to destroy the rest of the facility with his standard forces. The defeat of the Soviet Union brought an end to the Second World War, and the Allies believed that a new era of peace would ensue. Scientists who had worked to make weapons for the Allies were now free to pursue their own interests. This included Professor Einstein, who continued work on the Chronosphere. His work would prove invaluable in the not-too-distant future, as war would once again break out between the Allies and a reinvigorated Soviet Union under the leadership of Premier Alexander Romanov. At the start, the United States was alone in fighting the Union, but later, many European nations joined the fight alongside the US. Germany would allow the US access to Albert Einstein, who would supply the Allies his latest inventions with which to fight the Union. The Chronosphere played a valuable role in helping the Allies defeat the Soviet Union in the previous war, and would do so again. Einstein's continued work on the device over the years meant that many of its past issues had been ironed out. The most important being that it would no longer potentially create chrono vortexes when activated. Thanks to a new and improved design, the Chronosphere could now teleport whole groups of units at once. It did so by forming a bubble of energy around the marked units, and teleporting them to the chosen destination. In addition, these teleported units wouldn't return to their point of origin a short time later. The Chronosphere still had problems teleporting groups of infantry, however, as many would still end up dead after being chrono-shifted. Troops that were garrisoned inside transport vehicles, such as the Battle Fortress, could be safely chrono-shifted, arriving at their destination unharmed. The Chronosphere wasn't limited to teleporting allied units. It could also work against enemies. For example, against an enemy armored division, the Chronosphere could teleport the vehicles over open water, drowning them. The opposite could be done to naval vessels. Along with the Chronosphere's new design came new chrono-derived units. While the ChronoTechs of the previous war had been retired, the Allies made use of the new Chrono Miner for all their prospecting needs.
You'll get the cash in a flash.
At first, the Chrono Miner seems to be just another ordinary prospecting vehicle, conventionally traveling to an ore deposit. Once the Chrono Miner was full of ore, though, it would instantly chrono-shift back to its designated refinery. This function enabled the Allies to gather ore faster than their enemies, resulting in a faster accumulation of credits with which to fund their war efforts. It's important to note that Chrono Miners only teleported back to a refinery. I believe this was due to the chrono device on the miner needing to recharge after each teleportation, like the chrono tanks of the previous war. This function was vital to the miner's survivability, especially if it came under attack by hostile forces. If the miner used its chrono shift to arrive at a resource point, it would be unable to teleport again if suddenly attacked. The downside for the Allied miner was that it couldn't carry as many resources as the Soviets' war miner or Yuri's slave miner. This was due to the chrono device taking up more space on the vehicle. Another benefit of Einstein's continued research on the Chronosphere was the further downsizing of its technology. So much so that he was able to create portable chrono backpacks that infantry could wear. The users of these backpacks could teleport anywhere on the battlefield unharmed. The most famous dedicated chrono infantrymen were the Chrono Legionnaires.
Yes, Commander.
Wearing a special suit, rebreather, and armed with a unique weapon, the Chrono Legionnaire was a formidable opponent on the battlefield. A single Legionnaire was more expensive than an allied prism tank, but when used correctly, one could quickly see why. With their chrono backpacks, the Legionnaire could teleport anywhere on the battlefield. However, distance was a factor, and the further the Legionnaire had to teleport, the longer it would take for him to phase in at the target location. This phase-in process was when the Legionnaire was at his most vulnerable, as he was totally defenseless if spotted by enemies, resulting in his death or total erasure within the space-time continuum. This meant sometimes it was better for the Legionnaire to conduct a series of short teleportation jumps rather than a single long one. When facing off against their enemies, the Legionnaire does so using a special weapon. This weapon doesn't simply kill the enemy unit, it erases them out of time.
Never existed.
Generally speaking, the stronger the enemy unit, the longer it would take to be erased. Infantry units would be erased quickly, while vehicles would take longer. One Legionnaire could only focus on a single unit at a time, and if he was killed during the erasure process, then the partially erased unit would reappear back in real time. The Legionnaire's weapon could even be used to erase whole structures, though these would generally take the longest to erase. Additionally, the unit or structure being erased was immune to all other conventional weapons. Unlike regular infantry units, the Chrono Legionnaires could be safely teleported by the Chronosphere unharmed thanks to their special suits. Other Chrono-related units included the Chrono Commando.
A little C4 knocking at your door.
The Chrono Commando was only available to commanders who used a spy to infiltrate an allied battle lab. The Chrono Commando was similar to a Navy SEAL, albeit one that wore a Chrono backpack. Like the Legionnaires, the Commando used the backpack to teleport across the battlefield. The Commando was armed with C4 charges with which to demolish enemy buildings, and his submachine gun could quickly down enemy infantry. While they had the attitude of the Navy SEALs, the Commandos wouldn't swim in water, perhaps because their Chrono backpacks weren't waterproof. Crazy Ivans were a notorious group of Soviet explosive experts who planted timed explosives on, well, practically anything they could attach them to.
I lost a bomb. Do you have it?
Other commanders may get the opportunity to create their own Ivans after infiltrating a Soviet battle lab with a spy. An Allied commander may get the even crazier idea of giving these stolen Ivans Chrono backpacks, thus allowing them to teleport anywhere on the battlefield to more aggressively set explosives upon their enemies. The primary counter the Soviets had to all Chrono-related weapons was the Iron Curtain. It could protect their vehicle units and buildings from being phased out of existence by the Legionnaire's weapon, as well as preventing units from being teleported over hostile terrain by the Chronosphere. During the Soviet campaign of events, the Allies attempted to use the Chronosphere to teleport masses of units to the Ural Mountains. Their objective was to destroy one of the Soviets' battle labs located there, which had just finalized the blueprints for the new Apocalypse tank. An unnamed commander was sent to the region to oversee the defense of the battle lab as it came under assault by multiple waves of chrono-shifted units. After several attempts to destroy the battle lab, the Allies gave up, clocking in another victory for the unnamed Soviet commander. This commander would later go on to become premier of the Soviet Union and lead the final battle against the Allies at Point Hope, Alaska. Here, the Allies hoped to use the Chronosphere as a last-ditch effort to win the war. Upon noticing the Soviet commander's arrival, they immediately teleported units into his forward base in an attempt to destroy it. These attempts failed, however, and the commander destroyed the Chronosphere with a nuclear missile, finally asserting Soviet dominance over the Allies. During the Allies' campaign of events, Einstein's research laboratory located in the Black Forest mountain range of Germany came under attack by the Soviets. An unnamed Allied commander was sent there to oversee the defense of the research lab, for if the Soviets succeeded in destroying it, all hope for an Allied victory would be lost. After successfully defending the lab against the Soviets, Einstein told the Allies that an island in the Florida Keys would be the perfect place for him to set up his new Chronosphere. However, this location put the Chronosphere close to Soviet Cuba, where nuclear missiles had been deployed. The unnamed Allied commander was called upon to defend the Chronosphere, but also use it to destroy the nuclear missiles by teleporting his forces onto the well-defended island. In order to defeat the Soviet Union, the Allies would use the Chronosphere to cut off the head of the snake by attacking Moscow directly and capturing Premier Romanov. After paradropping a squad of Navy SEALs into the city, they quickly secured a compound that would serve as a great location to establish a base. The Allies chrono-shifted an MCV to do exactly that. As the Soviets scrambled to counter this incursion, the Allies teleported more units in to defend their foothold in the city. Using their full arsenal of conventional and ChronoTech units, the Allies defeated the Soviet defenders and captured Premier Romanov, bringing the war to an end. Romanov's psychic advisor Yuri evaded capture by the Allies, and later revealed his intentions to mind control the entire world using a global network of psychic dominators. To stop this from happening, the Allies again relied on Professor Einstein, who created a prototype temporal displacement device based on Chronosphere technology. This time machine would allow a small group of allies to travel backwards in time to prevent Yuri from completing his psychic dominator network. Alternatively, a group of Soviets still loyal to Romanov could have captured this device for themselves, using it to not only stop the traitor Yuri, but also prevent the Allies from winning the Third World War. If the Soviets succeeded in capturing the time machine, they would travel too far back in time, arriving in the Cretaceous period. While recalibrating the time machine, their forces would come under attack by Tyrannosaurus rexes. After returning to the middle of the Third World War, the Soviet time travelers linked up with Romanov's past self and told him exactly how the Allies won the war in their timeline. In Operation Deja Vu, Romanov ordered the Soviets' famed, unnamed commander to personally lead the assault on Einstein's Black Forest laboratory. The unnamed Soviet commander proved himself superior to his allied counterpart, succeeding in destroying the laboratory and Chronosphere. This caused the Allies in this timeline to surrender and join the Soviet Union in defeating Yuri. Yuri would attempt to escape his defeat by stealing the temporal displacement device, though he ended up getting trapped in the Cretaceous period, where he met an untimely demise.
What is that? Who is there?
While the Soviets were unable to capture Einstein's time machine during the Psychic Dominator disaster, they were able to secretly build their own based on what knowledge they had gathered. After getting themselves into another war with the Allies, the Union was once again on the brink of another loss. To prevent this, 3 of the Soviets' high-ranking officials used the untested time machine to travel back to 1927 and eliminate Einstein. Without the professor, it was believed that the Allies would never have gained the advanced technology they used to defeat the Soviets in past conflicts. Unfortunately for the Soviets, their efforts were in vain, as even without Einstein, the Allies managed to acquire a similar, or in some cases, the same advanced technology from previous timelines. This was largely thanks to an Amsterdam-based defense contractor and tech firm called FutureTech. FutureTech developed many state-of-the-art military products for the Allies, including the famed Chronosphere. While it was initially viewed by the public as a controversial weapon, the Chronosphere again proved its immense value during engagements against the Soviet Union and Empire of the Rising Sun. While the design was largely similar to the previous version of the Chronosphere, it could be built atop a platform out at sea. It had the same capabilities too, teleporting a group of units from one location to another, either safely from land to land, or from land to sea. Non-aquatic ground units would be destroyed when teleported over open water, as part of the Chronosphere's offensive capacity. Units with aquatic capabilities, however, would arrive on the water intact. It seems that even FutureTech were unable to develop a version of the Chronosphere that could reliably teleport squads of infantry unharmed. To better survive unfavorable encounters on the battlefield, FutureTech provided the Allies' Special Agent Tanya an experimental chrono device called a time belt. This belt allowed her to travel several seconds back in time. With it, Tanya could quickly escape danger, and even avoid injury by restoring her to a prior location and physical condition. Allied commanders had a variety of secret protocols they could use to aid them on the battlefield. Several of these protocols utilized Chrono technology, the first of which was called Chronoswap. When activated, Chronoswap caused 2 selected units to swap locations. After the swap, the selected units are disabled for a short time, though this is dependent on the distance between the 2 units. The further the units were from each other, the longer they'd be disabled after being swapped, which was when they were most vulnerable to enemy fire. It is possible to swap a land unit with a sea unit, though doing so would destroy both units, as they would be completely out of their natural element. Unlike the Chronosphere, the Chronoswap could be safely used on infantry. During the Second World War, the Allies were unable to chronoshift any explosive devices, which would typically explode before reaching the target destination, causing volatile friendly fire incidents. It didn't seem that FutureTech had these same issues with their Chronosphere, which enabled the Allies to teleport bombs anywhere on the battlefield, both on land and at sea. These were standard explosive time bombs, which would detonate after a few seconds. There were 3 variants of the time bomb. The most basic had a 5-second fuse and did moderate damage to units and structures within its blast radius. The second was the deluxe time bomb. which had a 10-second fuse, but did increased damage upon detonation. The third variant was called the Supreme Time Bomb, which had the longest fuse time of 20 seconds, but did the greatest amount of damage. These bombs could be destroyed before their timers reached 0, causing them to explode prematurely, inflicting reduced damage, though the more powerful the bomb, the greater its resistance to attacks. Alongside the time bombs, the Allies used another ChronoTech protocol called Chrono Rift. When activated, this rift causes units and structures within its radius to become temporarily phased out of time. When in this state, these forces cannot perform any actions, but at the same time, they are completely immune from all harm. Such a protocol was especially valuable for protecting vital infrastructure from attacks by enemy superweapons. The rift could also be used offensively. For example, phasing out enemy power plants could temporarily cut off their power supply. Used on production structures means the enemy would be temporarily unable to produce units. There were 3 levels of this protocol, the first being the Chrono Rift, the second being the Chrono Chasm, and the third was the Chrono Fissure. The Chasm and Fissure versions increased the protocol's area of effect. Like the Chrono Swap, the Chrono Rift could be safely used on infantry. Another important note regarding the Rift was that units could enter the space of phased-out structures. Such a maneuver could be dangerous, as when the structure phases back in, it instantly destroys the unit occupying its space. The destruction of the vehicle also causes damage to the structure itself. During the Soviet campaign of events, there were 2 major operations involving the Allies' Chronosphere. The first was during the Soviets' assault and capture of Geneva in Switzerland. The Soviets' unnamed commander arrived on the scene via Lake Geneva, and went up against the Allied commander Lisette Hanley, who utilized the Chronosphere to bring in naval reinforcements. Despite this, the unnamed commander, along with his co-commanders Oleg Vodnik and later Nikolai Krukov, defeated the Allied forces, securing Geneva for the Soviet Union. The next time the Union would have to contend with the Chronosphere was during their final battle against the Allies in New York City. The Allies staged a desperate defense on Liberty Island, where they used their Chronosphere to attack the Soviet commanders, who established their forward bases on the mainland. These attacks failed, with the Union finishing off the remaining Allied forces on their island stronghold. The Empire of the Rising Sun would also have notable confrontations with the Allies' Chronosphere during a couple of operations within their own campaign. The first of these was when the Allies launched an assault against the Empire's floating fortress known as the Black Tortoise, which was the only thing standing between the Allied fleet and the Japanese mainland. The Allies initially attempted to chronoshift units onto the floating fortress directly in an attempt to destroy its 2 power cores. These units were swiftly dealt with by the Imperial commanders, forcing the Allies to try and destroy the fortress using their navy, which would ultimately fail. After defeating the Soviet Union, the Empire shifted their attention to finishing off the Allies and targeted Amsterdam, where the FutureTech headquarters was located. Knowing that FutureTech was responsible for supplying the Allies with their advanced technology, it was imperative that their research center be destroyed. Surviving Soviet military forces had joined in helping the Allies defend Amsterdam. The most important among these forces was Gregor Zelinsky, the scientist responsible for creating the Soviets' time machine. Using the Allies' Chronosphere, Zelinsky attempted to correct his mistake by destroying the Empire of the Rising Sun. Much of Amsterdam, including the Empire's forces in the city, were destroyed by this maneuver. However, the Emperor himself sent his elite forces to aid his commanders, who finished off the FutureTech headquarters, resulting in the Empire becoming the supreme superpower on the planet. From the Allies' perspective, the Chronosphere was vital in helping them secure victory against their adversaries, the first of whom was the Empire. Thanks to gathered intelligence, the Allies discovered the Empire's shogunate were meeting in Tokyo. Field Marshal Bingham realized this would be the best opportunity to eliminate the Empire's entire chain of command in one stroke. An unnamed Allied commander, along with their co-commander Lisette Hanley, were sent out to conduct the mission. Originally, they were supposed to receive help from the Soviets, who claimed mid-operation that they couldn't provide the help the Allies needed. This resulted in the Empire using psionic decimators to cripple the Allies' forward bases. Using a Chronosphere, one of the Allied generals was able to teleport their MCV and surviving military forces into the city, effectively surpassing Imperial defenses. This enabled the commander to destroy each of the Imperial commander's headquarters, forcing the Empire to surrender to the Allies. After the defeat of the Empire and the betrayal of the Soviets, the Allies sought to capture the Union's leaders, who were located in Leningrad. After sneaking in a couple of shrunk MCVs and deploying them, the Allies were able to chrono-shift in units to secure a plateau with which to establish forward bases. From here, the Allies launched attacks against Union forces, which ultimately led to the capture of their leaders Krukov and Cherdenko. While the Third World War was officially over, the Allies had a difficult time keeping down resistance groups that had sprung up within the home territories of the Soviet Union and Empire. Crown Prince Tatsu helped the Allies in putting down the uprisings caused by some of the Empire's rogue commanders. One of these commanders was Kenji Tenzai, whose stronghold was located in Osaka. Kenji attempted to flee from the Allies inside his personal King Oni battle walker. With the help of Agent Tanya and some Cryo Legionnaires, Kenji's Oni was frozen solid, enabling the Allies to use their Chronosphere to teleport him to one of their military detention centers. Future Tech was given permission to establish research labs within the Soviet Union. Soviet resistance fighters resented these facilities, as Future Tech were using them to house captured Soviet scientists, as well as perform weapons tests on the Union's citizens. The Soviet resistance forces made it their goal to uncover Future Tech's plans, which were related to their latest project called the Sigma Harmonizer. A controversial invention located on Sigma Island, the Harmonizer was a device that enabled Future Tech to literally stop time, at least for whoever they deemed were their enemies, which in this case was the Soviet Union. Once the Union was out of the way, however, there was no stopping Future Tech, or its European Union-backed leader, Rupert Thornley, from using it on anyone else. Led by an unnamed commander, the Soviet forces sent to destroy the Sigma Harmonizer had to do so quickly. For each time the device was activated, time for the Soviets would come to a halt, making them vulnerable to the Allied defenders, who were left unaffected by this pause. Thankfully for the Soviets, pausing time required a tremendous amount of power that Future Tech didn't have to maintain the effect indefinitely. After eliminating production facilities of the Future Tank X-1, the Soviets discovered the control center on a small nearby island. With the destruction of this control center, the Sigma Harmonizer could no longer function. In the aftermath of the battle, Future Tech put all the blame for the Sigma Harmonizer project onto Rupert Thornley. As thanks for stopping the madman, the Allies pulled all their forces out of Soviet territories. To make up for the destruction of their Sigma Harmonizer project, Future Tech hired an unnamed commander to travel all over the world and collect technology from generals serving under the three global powers. One of these generals was Lydia Winters, who was assigned to a research base located in Canada. Here, the Allies were working on some key advancements to the Chronosphere tech they'd come to rely on. Future Tech wanted their commander to find out what the Allies were up to, and make sure their research suffered some unfortunate setbacks, as Future Tech couldn't allow the possibility of their own products being used against them. There were 3 research bases set up throughout the frigid testing grounds. Having already suffered one defeat against the Future Tech commander, Lydia made heavy use of the Chronosphere to teleport in reinforcements every couple of minutes to attack the commander's base. These reinforcements could appear anywhere in the region, though they mostly arrived close to one of the 3 allied bases. Despite this, the Future Tech commander was able to destroy all of them, and as a reward, was given blueprints to construct the Chronosphere as part of his arsenal of allied weapon systems. Another allied general the Future Tech commander had run-ins with was Douglas Hill. Hill was sent to Sweden to look after a dumping ground for unused munitions. These munitions weren't conventionally delivered. Instead, the Allies used the Chronosphere to teleport them into the region. These munitions mostly showed up as unexploded red barrels. Future Tech wanted this area for themselves, so sent their own commander to kick Douglas out. Both commanders had to cautiously maneuver their forces around the munitions, which could pop up almost anywhere at any moment. The future tech commander succeeded in forcing Douglas and his forces out of the region, and was given the multi-gunner IFB to use as part of his allied arsenal during future engagements. Of all the technologies in the Allies' arsenal, the Chronosphere proved to be the most valuable, but also the most consequential. On one hand, the Allies would have never achieved victory against the Soviet Union during the Second and Third World Wars, or stopped the Psychic Dominator disaster from occurring. On the other hand, it seems that any hard interference in the space-time continuum always resulted in unintended consequences. From the chrono vortexes seen during the Second World War, to the creation of a third world power in the Empire of the Rising Sun. With such technology now in the hands of the Future Tech Corporation, one can only speculate as to what consequences will arise regarding any further experiments in altering the space-time continuum.